me for these links, and so I'll email out a collated and labeled list of all the links so that you can view them. But they won't. I'm not planning on letting them be online forever. I would love for you all to take advantage of those while they're still up. But out of respect for our clinicians, I think we want to kind of protect the integrity of the seminar. But anyway, on to more fun things. We have today with us Diane Wittry of the Allentown Symphony and Tanya Maggi, who attended Monteux, which years again?
93 to
93.
95, many moons ago.
And is now the Dean of Community Engagement and Professional Studies with New England Conservatory. And they are here to talk to us today about community engagement, which I think, obviously has always been highly relevant and is more important today than ever, because we are in the situation where it may be all we have. Various ways of thinking about this. This way of sewing our organizations and our artistic selves into communities in a meaningful way. So thrilled to have both of them with us. They have both done amazing work, and I can't wait for them to share it with you all. So without further ado, take it away.
I'm just going to sort of start out by just giving an overview of what we hope to do today, so you have a little bit of a roadmap. We're going to spend a little time just introducing ourselves and saying hello, telling you a little bit of our backstory, and then we're going to go into some more in-depth community programs that we both participated in, and as well as designed. Diane has incredible resources that she's going to be sharing. And then we thought we'd talk a little bit more specifically about how to design really great partnerships. What are some of the fundamental pillars for partnership design? And then specifically address this period of time that we're in. What's coming up for us, what's worked well, where are the great shining spots of light in this period of time, and how are we going forward? And then we'd love to hear from you all, just to hear what's on your mind, case studies, things that you're wondering about, just kind of getting a little bit of a hive mind. And we'll hope to wrap up within an hour and 15 minutes or so. So just to give you some sense of our roadmap. And I'll turn it over to Diane to kind of kick us off with introductions, and then back to me.
All right, great. Thanks, Tanya. So I know some of you on the call, but I'll just give a little background of myself and my philosophy. So I'm currently the music director and conductor of the Allentown Symphony Orchestra, which is an orchestra that's been around for 70 years. We're a $3.5 million budget. But we also own a concert hall, which is, I always say, a blessing and a curse. We're a union orchestra with a CBA, which affects what we can do. We do about 24 concerts a year, usually 12 to 14 programs. Chamber music, we started a community symphony chorus 7 years ago. We have an El Sistema program. We also do other programming besides orchestra in the hall. We have extensive community outreach programs that I'll talk to you about in a minute. And we have a full-time education director and a board chair and committee of education. Contrasting that is my other orchestra, the Garden State Philharmonic, which is a much smaller orchestra. It's in residence at Ocean County College in Toms River, has a very small staff. It's a non-union orchestra, but it's all union players, all professional players from New York, but we do not have a CBA. We have a youth orchestra, a chorus, and a youth chorus in addition to the professional orchestra. Before that, I was music director and conductor of the Norwalk Symphony, the Ridgewood Symphony, Symphony of Southeast Texas, worked with the Pasadena Symphony in California as both their assistant conductor and their director of educational programs, was associate conductor of the Ojai Music Festival. And one of my first positions was with the Greater Miami Youth Symphony. Some of you know me as the author of Beyond the Baton, which is a book about artistic leadership. And if you know that book, you know that I'm passionate about reaching people through music. My personal mission is, and I live by this every day, is to bring music to people of all ages in new and different ways, and through this interaction to change their life for the better. And so everything I do is weighed against that when I work with my orchestras. So even though we we do music, and music is our product, and music is how we reach people. I do strongly believe that we're in the people business, and that everything that we do is done through people. And so that's what I've really dedicated my life to. And that's why I wrote the book Beyond the Baton, because I realized that many of us as conductors are really well trained as musicians, but we're not always as well trained in how to work with people, how to be an artistic leader, and how to motivate people. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya for an introduction, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about some of our outreach programs.
Great. I love that. I love hearing that philosophy. So great. So I'm Tanya Maggi. I'm currently, as Tiffany said, the Dean of Community Engagement and Professional Studies at New England Conservatory. I'm also a violist. The viola is a little dusty right now, but I did play in the Monteux Orchestra 1993 to 95, and I do think there are some people on this call who were actually there that summer, so it's been really fun to see some old names. My journey's been interesting. I come at my work very much as a performer. It certainly is my background. But I recognized at a certain point that for me, sitting in a viola section was not going to be the way to most effectively use my voice. I found myself as an educator actually in non-musical realms. So I've done work as an environmental educator. I've done a lot of work in early childhood education prior to even combining it with my musical interests. So I always knew education would be in the picture, but I really didn't have clarity around sort of my path. Until I was in graduate school, I found myself in a quartet. We were assigned to go out and play in high school auditoriums and elementary school auditoriums, and I quickly found that this was my passion. This was the way that I could use my voice. This was a way that I could amplify the music that I was so passionate about, and this was a way to really make impact. I ended up through circuitous journey in the New World Symphony, and I actually met Mark Thayer, who's on this call, executive director of Monteux, so lots of connections there, and was heavily involved in the early years of the community engagement programs that are now at the New World Symphony. From there, I went on to the Tulsa Philharmonic. I was the education director and a member of the orchestra for 3 years there. And from there, I went to the St. Louis Symphony and worked on the education team in St. Louis. And throughout this journey, I found myself doing a lot of consulting, working with orchestras large and small, working with numerous small chamber groups and music festivals and other types of organizations. And everyone seemed to be hunting for the magic formula for creating really great connections in community settings. And again, I would encounter this other piece, which was that the musicians often felt like they just didn't have the skill set to be able to do this work really effectively. So for me, I was really called to be able to do this work with younger students and to really move the needle in how musicians view themselves in relationship to community. By a series of events, I found myself at the New England Conservatory, and I have been there for the last 16 years. I founded the Community Performances and Partnerships program at NEC, which is a large integrated program at NEC that brings students out into the community. We do, over the course of 16 years, we've developed over 125 partners. Many of them have been running consistently for the last decade. We work with schools and nursing homes, hospitals, senior centers. We do residencies, teaching fellowships, workshops. So very, very integrated into the city of Boston, and at the same time are giving students a window into this work so that they can be professionally successful, but also that they really get back to the original reason why they became musicians. To Diane's point, this is a people industry, and I think many students in the intensity of a conservatory atmosphere lose sight and really are hungry for a way to connect their art with the community. So for me, it's been incredibly a joyful wonderful honor to be able to watch this sort of program unfold and this work unfold. And I lead a number of organizations nationwide to work with other conservatories to have a real push for students to be able to do this work when they get out into the world. So that's the hat that I wear. So I wear the conductor. I've worked with many conductors. I'll certainly speak to my work, within the orchestra, but then I also really represent the training and importance of the students, the musicians that you'll all be working with or are already working with. I'll add one more hat there, which is I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. So I have sat on the other side of the stage in the audience for many family concerts and other types of events. So it's very interesting to add the audience member hat, the parent hat into the mix. So I'm going to bounce it back to Diane to talk a little bit more about all the wonderful things that she's been involved with.
Thank you, Tanya. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the educational programming that we've done in Allentown. And many of you have orchestras already, so you may be familiar with some of these. And I'm going to have Tiffany put up a handout that we can all see, but I wanted to highlight a couple that I find are a little bit unusual or that accomplished goals that surprised me in the end. So Tiffany, you want to put, there we go. Okay. So I just wanted to start. So many orchestras do what we call school time concerts. That's where you bust the kids in, educational booklets. I will say that for many years, we've been working with a team of teachers in the community that write our educational booklet for us. We stole this idea from the Philadelphia Orchestra. They get teacher credit. They get to take off one of those training days for writing our booklet. We also give them some free tickets. But what it does is it ensures that they teach the booklets and that they bring their kids to the concerts. So I recommend that type of involvement. Even if you have people that can write your booklets, it's better if you involve your community in writing your booklets. Many of these are self-explanatory, so I'm going to skip down. So notice the importance of having student-based activities, but also having adult-based activities. Very, very critical. We've been doing the Meet the Artist lunch in Allentown, which we do on a Friday. We tried doing pre-concert talks and we found our audience wants to go to dinner. They don't want to come early for a talk. They want to go to dinner. And so we do our talk on a Friday before. We're lucky that we own our concert hall, so we can do it right on stage. They sit where the orchestra sits. The guest artist is 2 feet away from them. Interesting things always happen. So we create an ambiance of you never know what's going to happen at the brown bag. They may play and talk through the piece they're going to play. They may pull out something totally different and do that. So people feel they want to come because they want that personal interaction. We also have invited schools to come where they'll bring a whole busload of students to that. It's free to the public. It's just 1 hour. We did a flash mob. We got a sponsorship from the downtown area to have musicians just appear at lunchtime in different restaurants. And that was a lot of fun and a little bit unusual. Master classes. I encourage you to, when you negotiate with your guest artist, to always include a master class. If you talk about it up front, you can get this for no extra fee. The managers are so eager for you to sign that artist, or the artist is so eager just to have the job, that they will just, if you say, yes, we always do a master class, they'll agree to it. So just a word of advice, because if you go back after the fact, there's always going to be an additional fee. But if you negotiate it ahead of time, you can do that with very little expense and usually no extra expense. Fantasy, symphony, and chamber music. This is one that we are not currently doing, but we're hoping to bring back. This is like fantasy baseball. This is like the program that Baltimore Symphony was doing with amateur musicians. It's opening up a program where they can play in an orchestral setting. We did it 2 years orchestrally, and then we did it 1 year as chamber music. Some of the orchestral people were scared of the chamber music, I have to say, but some of the people love the chamber music because they wanted that type of relationship one on a part. I bring it up because from this program, surprisingly enough, though not so surprising because I anticipated this, but I didn't anticipate how well it would work. We ended up increasing our subscribers because many of these people then became subscribers. They weren't before because they wanted that personal ownership. We also ended up getting chair sponsored. And so this developed a depth of relationship that I want to encourage. So we're going to be looking at doing more of that. There are many people, I think they said that 70% of people who attend concerts either played an instrument or sang in a chorus. That also ties into why we founded the Symphony Chorus 7 years ago, was to reach those people. El Sistema programs are great, but I will say they cost a huge amount of money. Our El Sistema program costs us about $200,000 a year. So don't go into those programs lightly, because if you start them, you owe it to the students to keep going. And so you're really making a long-term commitment. So you want to make sure that you can fund that. We're going to talk a little bit later about funding. Going down, sensory-friendly concerts. This is something we're actually beginning to start in Allentown, and we're not going out after this on our own. We are partnering with an autism society, and we have a woman who is president of that who's autistic and is, I think, 26 years old. So we're really dealing with adult autism as well as younger children. And we're letting them guide us, and we're letting them tell us how to do this program. And actually they're coming up also. So that's a really great partnership. We're just beginning the health and wellness partnership with the hospital. And Tanya has a great booklet from Pittsburgh that I just was so thrilled about, that I'm gonna be reading very thoroughly and passing that on, because I think that going forward, this is an area that we all need to do some work in. Going down where we have competitions, most orchestras have competitions. It's a great way to involve your community. We started doing composer competitions about 5 or 6 years ago, and this was really a phenomenal changing point for us. And from that, we now have appointed a 2-year composer in residence. So the uniqueness of I want to talk about 2 of the projects we did that I thought were really, really fun. We did an Elgar Enigma Variations project where the task was, we had different categories. We had middle school and high school, we had college, and we had adult. And the task was we were of course doing the Enigma Variations. We wanted to create a new Enigma Variations. And so people were told to write a piece between 1 and 3 minutes long for instrumentation as large as the Enigma Variations, but it could be anything smaller than that. And they were supposed to pick a person that they wanted to capture, give us their initials, and give us a few sentences about them. And we were able to then, we had a composer put these together, the winning ones, into a larger piece that we then played before the Enigma Variations, and all the composers were there. So we had a 12-year-old, we had a 17-year-old, we had a 21-year-old, and we had an adult. And from this, people began to become very, very engaged in new music, because the variety of the types of writing that was demonstrated and the quality level was pretty amazing. So we followed that up the next year with Pictures and Exhibition, a similar concept. The Elgar Enigma we kept more regional. The Pictures and Exhibition we opened up actually to the tri-state area. So New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And for that, we selected 4 winners, and so their pieces were played. And it's a similar thing, only here we partnered with our art museum. So we have an art museum that has a collection in person, but also you can have it online. So we encourage people to go to the art museum or to see the online collection and to pick a painting. And then from that to write a piece. And so similarly, we were able to do then a reception at the art museum ahead of time. We were able to have them talk about the artwork that was selected. We were able to show the artwork. So it's a community partnership that went many different ways. So from this, we now have a new composer in residence. We're doing a really cool composer summer workshop that's going to be in about 2 weeks, if any of you are composers. We then, from that, built a local composer consortium of 8 composers at the different universities, colleges, and 3 high schools in our region. I've been trying for years to develop meaningful connections with these universities and colleges, and never felt that we were really doing something that was really impactful. You know, we'd send them the notices, we have free tickets for college kids. They would, you know, sometimes come on a bus, they'd sometimes do a talk before, after, but it wasn't what I felt was really impactful. And I didn't feel the faculty was really engaged. Well, now they are engaged. I have these 8 composers that are totally engaged with this workshop. They created the ideas. They wanted video games because they said that's not their specialty, and many of their students want to learn how to write for video games, film music, and documentaries. And so we brought in experts in the field, and then we're doing career. We've got Chia Toscani from ASCAP coming, and Deidre coming from BMI. So we're able to, because of COVID, actually, we're able to bring in some really amazing guest speakers. So that's something that has developed and is starting now. That will involve 3 chamber music concerts that we will solicit from all of these composers and their students. We have a list of 100 students now that will become this community of composers that we're going to develop over the next few years, and they will have their music presented at these chamber music concerts. Then I listed some partnerships that we've done over the years. So we look for anybody we can partnership, I try to partner with. Ones I want to highlight are the Girl Scouts, where we worked out around our family concert that by doing a series of activities around that, that they could actually earn a badge. And so we were at a point, we do not do that project anymore. I do want to bring it back, but we had a point where we were bringing 400 Girl Scouts to the hall for these concerts to earn their badge and to do these series of activities. The Organ Festival, I love that one. That turned out to be a week-long festival through the American Guild of Organists, culminating in, we commissioned Erica Wazen to write a new organ concerto for us. So we culminated in that, but around that, we had all the different organists in town doing concerts at different churches, and we created all the marketing for it. And so we really spearheaded this community involvement. Same thing with the Beethoven Festival. This was quite a few years ago, but it was one of those anniversaries of some sort, and we put the word out. We were doing one of the major, we were probably doing Beethoven 9. We put the word out that the week before our concert, and it landed up being 10 days before our concert, we encouraged everybody of any type of group to do Beethoven and to let us know about it. So we had a marching band doing a Beethoven halftime show. We had, middle school orchestras playing Beethoven. We had choruses singing. So we basically became the channel that marketed this festival. We didn't fund it all. We just said, let's do something fun together, and we will be the umbrella organization. My goal is that the Allentown Symphony is the center point for all sort of music and arts activities in our community, and that we encourage people to work through us for these. So then I've just listed other types. One of the things that when you look at partnerships is, who can you partner with? You see the Wildland Conservancy up there. That's kind of an unusual one. We just did a commission piece for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and we wanted to commission a piece. And so we went to them and say, would you be interested in this? And they were thrilled. They had never in their life thought about commissioning a piece of music. And now they want to do another one. I mean, now they're actually coming to the concerts. We had a joint reception with our boards. Everybody got to know each other. We shared some board members, and it was just a great way to bring people together. On the virtual outreach, and we'll cover some of this when we talk more about COVID, but everything now has shifted to virtual. So these are, Stephanie, you wanted to just roll it up a little bit? There we go. So many of you are already doing these. I just put them down as reminders of things that can be done. And these are things that we're going to be continuing going forward. So, conductor chats, composer chats. We just did one with our new composer in residence. I'm working my way through all of our guest artists, and we're doing interviews through Zoom. They're very easy to do through Zoom. You just press the button record, as you all know. We're airing concerts. We're doing pre-recorded with chamber music where people are all in the same space and we're recording it or live streaming it. And then we've all delved into the recordings where everybody records separately, and we're all learning a lot about how to do that. We've done a lot of surveys with our audience to sort of see what they're interested in. What was coming back is they want live music, but we can't do that yet. I think areas that we can all begin to expand in, we haven't done it yet, but more music appreciation is a great opportunity for us to educate for people that are interested in that. We've talked about doing community play-alongs where everybody's muted, but they can all play the same piece together and sort of develop a sense of community. And we're looking into, in the fall, performing hopefully in person in our hall with a limited audience of maybe 250, but live streaming the concerts. And we're evaluating whether we can do that fee-based or whether that would be free. So those are just some ideas. And we're going to open up the chat so we can share some ideas. But as you notice, there's a lot of things on there. My goal is to continually, I call it research and development. If you work for a big corporation, they're continually trying new things. And then you evaluate and you see what works and what didn't work. And so that's why some of these have fallen off, because we did them for a while and we decided, okay, we're going to shift our resources somewhere else. You always have limited resources. But then some of them we go, oh, that was so successful, maybe it's time to bring that one back. But your job as an artistic leader is to continually challenge your board and to engage and excite them. And I'm of the philosophy, if you're not going up, you're going down. So I'm always pushing, let's keep going up and let's keep trying new things. And eventually they'll buy into this and it will be very, very exciting for everybody involved. So that's a little bit from the orchestral side. I'm going to turn it back to Tanya to talk about more with individual musicians.
Yeah, and actually, I'm curious. I actually have a question for you, Diane. What kind of buy-in do you have generally from your musicians as you're looking forward to each year? Are your musicians actively at the table helping to design some of these activities, or are they, kind of pulled along, or is it a mixture of both, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a mixture of both. And I would actually like more involvement from the musicians. And what actually is happening during COVID is we're able to have some Zoom calls with our musicians. We are a per service orchestra. So if we were a full every week they're there, it would be a little bit different. But because we're per service, we only catch them in person. We have approximately one concert a month, sometimes two, depending on the schedule. So people that live in the region are much more involved with our educational outreach. But it's one of the things we have to evaluate is, do we have the right people to do the outreach? So in Allentown, I have more people locally that can do the outreach. With the Garden State Philharmonic, it's much more difficult because most people live in New York and we perform at the Jersey Shore, which is a good hour to an hour and a half drive for most of my musicians. And so outreach there is really a challenge because it's a long trek. So you do have to look at your resources. But I also look at so chamber music and stuff, we have set groups and they will come to me all the time and say, I got a program I want to talk to you about. I just talked to our brass principals. They want to do an outdoor parks concert. So I'm going to make that happen. So I will say it's kind of a shared thing, and you want to keep the door open always for them to come with ideas. But I wouldn't sit around and wait, because as you made the good point, is older musicians were not trained to even think this way necessarily, where the younger ones tend to come with all the ideas right away. So it depends on your orchestra.
Yeah, it's really just so interesting because from where I sit, my goal is to have conservatory musicians going out into the world who are going to be at your door the minute that they're hired with ideas and really able to execute them. Yeah. And there are more and more programs in place in conservatories and schools of music now that I think are really honing in on on high quality training. One thing that strikes me, even just listening to all this, is just I keep seeing the theme of kind of development in partnership with the community and looking at the sustainability piece. So that, and for me, that's really been hugely important in the development of the programs that we've been doing up in Boston, that our musicians, in our case, our musicians are coming and going because they're students, but the partnerships have been around for a long time, and we're, continually investing and reimagining them. as we go. For us, it's been this beautiful journey to get to see some of these partnerships evolve over time and, kind of respond in real time to the types of needs in the moment. Obviously, this time being one of them, we've had to be really creative. So we'll certainly talk more about the COVID piece. We at the conservatory have not only classical music, but also jazz and contemporary improvisation. So many of our programs have really tried to integrate improvisation and creating into them. So while we do some, sort of community-based performances, the vast majority of our programming is heavily interactive. So we do songwriting residencies with adolescents in psychiatric care. We do a lot of work in health and wellness where we're going into hospital settings and actively engaging kids in writing music. We work with all of the El Sistema programs in the Boston area. And while we're often doing master classes and sort of more traditional community engagement activities, we also really try to have a more creative element as well, where, the kids are writing graphic scores or are working with the composer or are premiering a new piece that they've written together. So that sort of creative energy has really been interesting to harness, and it's something that I'm always curious to see where it goes for our musicians that do head into orchestras. Beyond just the role that they play in the orchestra, what else are they able to contribute? So I think that's just always something interesting to think about. When I worked at the St. Louis Symphony, I just remember getting to know some of the hidden talents of the members of the orchestra was just this incredible uncovering, that someone in the viola section really loved to write, electronic music, and, someone in the violin section is a fantastic fiddler, and, being able to capitalize on some of those skills, I think is always a great opportunity. Just looking at the time, I'm going to shift gears a little bit into just sharing some of the broad strokes of what makes for a good partnership. And I know that most people on this call have lots of experience with partnerships. I've keep coming back to some of these like tried and true pillars in my own partnership building practice. It's interesting because sometimes I feel like I stray away and I get enticed by some like fancy partnership, and then I realize, wow, I'm losing sight of some of the things that I know make partnerships really effective. So I'm just going to share a really brief little PowerPoint with some, broad strokes. And for those of you who are kind of new into partnership development or just starting to think about educational outreach, community engagement, hopefully these can be helpful in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Here we go. Oops. Okay. Okay, great. So these are some broad themes, and there are lots of photos of my students. I just love looking at them when we're not able to see them. Sorry, let me just, okay. So first and foremost for me, it's always about personal relationships. This just goes without saying that the personal relationships are key to making partnerships really effective. And to the point where sometimes I'll develop a personal relationship with someone at a site and they move to another site, and I'll just decide, you know what, I'm going to follow them because it's going to be really great. Whatever we do together, it's going to be great. We have a lot of turnover of teachers in the Boston Public Schools, for example, and we'll often just follow teachers as they go. That's not to say that we don't have personal relationships with like the, more established leadership people in leadership positions, but I do think that the personal relationships are key. For my students that I'm working with, when they come into a setting and they know that, I'm discussing, that I have a relationship that's been built with the person in the room, that I know the complex number of factors that are going into that educational setting. I know the name of the partner's dog. I know that they've been out sick for or just had a knee injury. Those kinds of things really make for sustained partnerships. Form follows function. So this to me means that the function of the partnership can only work if you've developed it in a way that is implementable, that you can implement. So many times I'll sit in a meeting and we're planning this really fancy thing and it's really great. And we just lose sight of the actual practical elements that are going to make it actually work. So the form that it can take is really, really important. We have one that comes up often, which is that we have a number of students, pianists, who want to be performing in the community, and they need at least relatively decent pianos to be able to perform on. And sometimes we'll forget that little detail and we'll plan something really elaborate, and then we realize, oh wow, we completely forgot about the piano. So really thinking about how are you going to implement, what is the form, what form is it going to take so that it can function well. Multi-layered communication. So really being able to think about all the different people that need to be in on the communication train. And that's from the classroom teacher all the way up to the head, head of the school, or the activity director at a senior center, all the way up to, the overall organization that runs the senior center. Museums, making sure that everyone's on board and knows the event is actually happening. So often I see a breakdown in the communication trail, and that really leads to a partnership that just doesn't, an event that doesn't go well, and then a breakdown in trust over time with the partnering organization. And this includes with the musicians. So I still am remembering an event at the St. Louis Symphony where I went on vacation and just didn't communicate very well with one of the members of the trombone quartet that was going out to school. And years later, I ran into one of the members of that quartet, and they remembered that, oh, we showed up and they didn't know we were coming. Like, they actually remembered that. So I'm haunted by these kinds of communication breakdowns, and I'm always trying to avoid them. Knowing when to say no and appreciating when others say no. And this can be really hard because you've got a great idea and you're like, they need it. And you get in there and they're like, no, we don't. We don't want to do your project. So for me, this has been a learning curve over time. I really do appreciate it when someone comes to me and says, look, this is a great idea. We just can't do it right now. As opposed to jumping in and trying to make something happen that just isn't going to happen well. And then on the flip side, just knowing where your boundaries are, knowing what are your core values, knowing when a partnership is just not going to be the right thing for you in this time. Organizational buy-in from stakeholders and leadership of partnering organization. So making sure that all the people at the table are really invested and know you're coming and know it's happening. Again, I've had many circumstances where we've gone into a school and we have a great relationship with the teacher, so we've got that personal relationship. But then the principal is not at all interested in, or doesn't even know that we're going to be there. Or there may be a change in leadership at the institutional level that really does affect the nature of the partnership going forward. So really important. Building relationships with key personnel. As I said, the relationship building is absolutely the most important thing that you can possibly do. And that means going above and beyond and writing really great thank you notes and attending events at the school or at the site. So, we're often invited to volunteer appreciation events. We always make a point to go to really try to make sure that we're on the ground with our partners and understand the needs that they have and what's going on in their world. Creation of a working structure. So, how is it that you're going to get things done? Who are the key people? How are you going to do this well? How are you going to move things forward? Some people take a long time to answer email. Is that really the person that you want to be communicating with? Maybe you need to find someone else who's going to be like the doer. Maybe there's one person you identify as the visionary, and then another person is the person that you go to get things done. So just sort of figuring out what's going to work well. Ongoing evaluation and assessment. I'm sure that all of you are familiar, or many of you familiar with the need to evaluate your programs, assess them, and that can take many forms. We do a lot of fact gathering, of course, at the end of each year, but then we also do focus groups. We meet one-on-one with all of our partners, and we really get feedback from the participants of the programs as well. Beware partnerships driven by funding. This one can be hard because if you're given a great amount of money to do something, it's very tempting to just jump right in. But you really can find yourself in a situation where you're doing something that is not driven by core values or by your mission. Um, on the flip side, sometimes you have this funding and you can be really creative and think about how do we align this with our goals of our organization. But just something to consider. Adapt and be flexible and enjoy the surprises. So for my students, this is the biggest one. They often are used to a very organized, they have a lot of expectations for what's going to happen, and we throw them in and they're experiencing it all. And I think for professional musicians, particularly ones who have not had a lot of experience with this work, this piece can be the scariest. What? You want me to be in front of a room full of squirming kindergartners and I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And, the bell goes off in the middle and they're all distracted and like, how do I handle this? So the continuing to adapt and enjoy the process. And also for my students, I really try to focus on the importance of the art of these programs, that this is as artful as anything else that they do. And really figuring out how to do it well is a challenge, but very rewarding. And that's just a quick little 10 top tips from me. So I'll turn it back over to Diane to either comment on some of this or add her experiences, and then maybe we'll move into what are we doing right now in this moment, this COVID moment where we've had to adapt and definitely enjoy the surprises if we can.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stop share. Sorry, lost my...
Yeah, Tanya, that was great. I love that PowerPoint. One of the things that really struck me was, when you mentioned about not chasing the money, I think it's a very important point. Another point I want to bring up is when you do go for grants, when you are committed to a project and it's a new thing, like when we were doing our side-by-side concert, I wanted to do the side-by-side with high school kids in the area. I went on that grant call and I made the ask for 3 years because I didn't want our organization to roll out a program that was that intensive to get going and that, building all those relationships and go down that pathway and then think that maybe the funding wouldn't be there to continue it. And so I've really, made the point to the donor that, it wasn't fair to the students, it wasn't fair to the organization unless they would really step up for 3 years. Now, what happened with that program is then we weren't as good. The risk is you become complacent because you have your 3-year donor and you focus on implementing, and then suddenly the 3 years were up and we hadn't rolled out another donor. So I will admit that one we got in trouble a little bit because the donor fully expected us to do our job and get a donor to follow because he wanted to get it going, but he didn't want to fund it forever. So those are just some things to keep in mind that, continue your fundraising. Don't sit back just because you have a really nice grant that will pay for everything and assume that you're fine. The other thing is to keep things a little bit interdisciplinary is kind of a buzzword now. And, as I was looking at the photos and seeing the musician in the classroom with the kids, there's a lot of learning and teaching that's now being done where the music is the vehicle to teach other subjects. And so to be keeping that in mind as you're working with your orchestral musicians, they may not be thinking that way. They may be only thinking like music history. I'm going to take you through, Bach to, Copland. But they may not be thinking about how, quarter note and a whole note can be applied to math or something like that, or how the shape of a piece of music is like an architecture and could be compared to a building. So I really encourage you as leaders to work with the teachers because they're all thinking interdisciplinary, and to find a teaching partner that can help you apply the standards to whatever you're doing is very critical, both for funding and for the teachers taking the time to allow you into their classrooms and to develop, a teaching curriculum with you. So those are just some things that came to mind. I will say that the administration of the program is usually where orchestras trip up. When you're a small orchestra, you don't have enough staffing. It's taking the time to find the right volunteers for the right job. And as Tanya so well said, some people are visionaries and they will talk, but don't give that person an organizational job because it's going to fail. Know how to assess, and this is a skill you have to develop as a conductor or you're not going to be successful, how to assess and put the right people in the right jobs to help. And don't try to do it all yourself. You could have the best plans, but if you start doing it all yourself, your board will rely upon you to do it because you're doing it so well. So, sometimes you have to actually not be as good as that side, but be better at delegating and building a team so that it will have a life beyond you. The most important thing is it's not centered around you. It's community, that you grow your community and have more and more people involved. So those are just some thoughts I wanted to add. Yeah.
I wonder if right now it makes sense to kind of actually open up the dialogue, and that can include talking about how are we handling this work in this time. But I think it'd be great to get some more voices in the mix. So if there are any questions that you might have about anything we discussed and or, interesting things that you're doing right now, how you're handling this period of time in your work.
Yeah, so people in the room, please feel free to go ahead and just participate in the conversation. We had in our conversations leading up to today, we had decided that we did want to hear from all of you in terms of what you are doing, and not just questions, right? Feel free to share like projects that you've done or want to do that might shape our conversation in an interesting way. And Diane, maybe I wanted to forward a comment from the YouTube stream that's going on right now, which is from Allison Kiger. She says that one of the most successful outreach events with the Allentown Symphony was when you had school music classes compose and sing lyrics to the slow movement of Schumann's Second Symphony for school time shows. So as a conversation starter, first of all, congratulations. That's an amazing idea. And I think I'm going to do that.
Well, what I would say, one of my goals is that every single school concert has to have audience participation.
Yeah.
And it has to be fun and meaningful audience participation. And never to underestimate cello as a drone note, open D to Bach's, I think it was Bach's Minuet, where they've never played a cello before in their life, and we sit them down, we give them a cello, and they're on stage performing. So it's in creative ways that they are intimately involved. Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. Feel free to participate. Also, the chat is open if you want to stick questions in there that I can moderate a sort of conversation around there. One that occurred to me earlier, Diane, was when you were talking about how you put yourself in the position to ask for the funding for a particular project. And so maybe if you could tell us what a sample dialogue of that would look like, because many of us, I mean, maybe some of us have heard the adage, actually, don't let yourself be the one to ask for money. Make somebody else do that as a music director. And like what you're saying seems to be a very different, and to me, an approach that has a lot of integrity about it. So would you give us a window into what that interaction feels like and is like?
Yeah, so first off, I didn't set up the call. So the call was set up through the executive director, and they were there on the call, and I think a board member was there. You don't want to have too many people on the call because you don't want to overpower them. But the music director or the education director, depending on the structure of your orchestra and the size of your orchestra, is usually the most passionate person about the project. Mm-hmm. And the person that has the ability to really speak about how it will be organized, what their goals are, what they feel the impact is, what difference they hope to make in the lives of the people participating. And so with our process is that someone will set up this call. I'm always willing to go on a call. And I spend a lot of time before you make the ask, finding out what they're interested in.
Yeah.
So it's very important that you know your community, and I knew that the person we were meeting in for this side by side, I knew that his passion was leadership and training young people to be better citizens. He didn't really care so much about music, but he cared about students. And so I was able to explain how this side-by-side could change people's lives, how it could give them a window. And honestly, he's passed away now, but he would be so thrilled because I have 2 people that participated in that side-by-side program years ago that are now playing as auditioned members of the Allentown Symphony, winning the job behind a screen. Yeah. Yeah, and it's so great to know that they were inspired by playing that side by side. So you have the conversation, you try to figure out what is their passion. You never try to sell them something that they're not passionate about because it won't work in the end. You know, so I always call it going fishing. You put some bait out there and you see if they bite. And then if they're interested, you take that further. So also when you go on a call, you don't want to go with just one idea. You want to do your research, and then you want to have at least 3 different ideas, perhaps of different funding levels, to kind of throw out. And then usually they will ask for, I don't like to even come in, you know, with pre-prepared information. We find out what they're interested in, then we say, can we send you some more information after this with some more numbers, how we think this is going to be and what we'd really like. And so know that it's not going to happen necessarily. Though I will admit, I went on one fundraising call where we walked in and we walked out with a $10,000 check. That's only happened once to me, but so you never know. But usually it's a process. When they express interest, whether you're preparing the materials or an education person, a board member, it's your job to make sure it's done and done quickly before they forget and move on to something else. I think a lot of funding is lost simply because the packet was never sent afterwards. So it really should go out the next day and, you know, give them a week to look at it, and then someone makes a phone call. So as a music director, I don't think you need to lead that role, but I think it is very helpful if you are involved because you're the person that's excited about it, hopefully.
Right. Yeah. Tanya, would you like to respond to that? We had a question come in the chat about early stages of initiating these kinds of partnerships. So maybe if you could bundle that into your response to Diane.
Great. And that's exactly what I was just about to do. It's a really nice segue into that question. You know, I actually just this morning had a virtual meeting with a hospital around a new partnership. And one of my first questions is always, what do you need? What do you wish to see? So really putting it in the hands of the person you're interested in partnering with, as opposed to, here's what I need, here's what I have to offer. I found that you know, certainly that comes up, but it's really important to assess need. And I think it positions you then to be someone who comes across as a good listener. I really think that that's key and very important in a new partnership. I think doing your research, and connect the connections that you have. So often my students leave school and they're really excited about a project and they have no idea where to start. And, you know, my advice is, okay, so what are your resources? What are your assets? How are you assessing what you have around you? You want to start working in school? It's great. Well, what about the school that you graduated from, or the school where your sister is the band director, or, you know, your neighbor has an affiliation with a senior center, they work there. Is there a way that you can use that communication channel to make something happen? So that can be really helpful. And then, you know, getting into a situation where you can get on the phone, or you can get in a room, or you can get into a Zoom call to just have an exploratory conversation. I think a big turnoff is when you go in like, this is what I want to see happen. I'm going to impose this on you. That does not make for good communication, and it doesn't make for good trust building, and it doesn't make for ultimately good partnerships. So my biggest advice would be really, really listening to need, and then creatively thinking about how you can work for mutual benefit together.
Yeah. Great. Well, maybe the chat got some really good questions in it. So maybe I'll just go down in the order that they came in. So we have a question from Desmond about COVID your COVID lives right now. So what's happening in particular, he asks, with the partnered schools? Are there plans to continue your programs during COVID, and any examples that you can think of?
I can take it, and then Tanya after.
Yeah.
So we have an El Sistema program, and that's directly at the school. We're normally rehearsing right at a school, and our students, many are from one school, but they come from multiple schools. We basically made sure that the kids had their instruments. We went and picked them up. We did a special, come pick them up. So our instruments are in the hands of our kids. But we found that even with that, we're doing our summer camp online, but we're challenged in the fact that most of our kids are inner city kids. They don't always have internet, or they don't have enough computers in the home where if the parent is working at home, there's not some way for the kid to participate. So we dropped down from usually about 100 kids participating all the way down to about 35 kids regularly participating. And some families don't, they're unemployed. They have, so the kids we're dealing a lot of emotional issues, not just at this point. We are planning on whatever the schools do, we will do. We will follow the schools. So if our schools open, we will have something, if we're able to have anything in person, but if not, we will have to continue all online. So we're all in a holding pattern with that. And our partnerships are pretty much going to be put on hold for going forward in the short term, hoping that this won't last too long. The only new project we may start will be the health and wellness, because the hospitals are definitely up and running, and there's definite interest in that. And that can be done with individual musicians or very small groups. So that's probably where we're going to be focusing our energy in the short term to get something new and exciting going in that area. Tanya?
Right. Yeah, and I would say I'm actually just doing our annual report right now, and it's interesting to me. We were able to shift about 75% of our programming into a virtual space, like within a week. So we were full on committed to we're going to make this happen. So like Diane just said, we reached out to all of our partnering schools, and what can we do if not our normal work with you? How can we shift to, offer kids online lessons? So a lot of work that was previously sitting in and doing sectionals in the orchestra has been shifted to more one-on-one work, which has actually been a blessing for a lot of programs where the kids are not normally able to get that kind of attention. So we've actually increased our amount of teaching work. We were really successful in having musicians in residence at several schools. So they created little series. They would come in and they would integrate into some of the Zoom classrooms. I would definitely encourage anyone working in school districts right now to be in touch with the administration. So the head of the performing arts for a district. They're, I think, really trying to get arts partners into the classrooms as much as possible is my understanding from the calls that I've been on nationwide and certainly in Boston. Trying to figure out all of the legalities of getting arts partners to be able to continue to have access to kids through their teachers. So we've done a lot of the work. Also, we have really stepped it up with work with adult learners. And my phrase that I keep using is it's about attitude, not about age. We've been able to do a lot of live stream and Zoom performances for older adults. Similarly, we've been doing a lot of work with a field hospital here, which has since closed, but doing a lot of work around the health and wellness piece, doing pre-recordings, doing a lot of interactive Zoom recordings, and actually being able to develop some programming that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So I've been very optimistic about the work that we have been able to do, and we're just trying to make it better as we go into this upcoming year.
Yeah, I have a point, and Tanya, I don't know how you're addressing this, but I don't have the answer, but I think it's something that we all are going to be facing. And a colleague brought up to me, a colleague of mine does a lot of lectures for the Santa Fe Opera and does a lot of examples of music in his lectures. He's thinking about taking these lectures online. And we suddenly realized we don't know enough about licensing rights of when you put something up on the internet. We're used to just kind of doing it and hoping nobody notices. But if this continues, we're going to need a Zoom call where we're all educated on licensing. because I'm not sure how many seconds, whether it's the 30 seconds, even if you just want to do a music appreciation for students, what we're actually able to do if it's up on a non-private thing on the internet. So I just bring that up as a challenge that we're all going to be facing. But it's wonderful that we can shift and we can reach so many more people. I saw in the chat, somebody was asking about, the broader community of people you can reach. It's phenomenal,
Yeah.
That's actually a great segue into a question that we had about reaching especially quote unquote non-musician audiences, and perhaps with your take on how to use effectively social media to do outreach and promotion.
You hire somebody really young that's really good at it.
Yep.
No, I mean, we are so used, when we hire a timpani player, we hire someone that's trained to be a timpani player, right? So if we're not trained in social media marketing, I think orchestras need to look at hiring people part-time that are experts in that. If your goal is to really reach a much broader audience, hire an expert to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just add, having really targeted storytelling. I mean, the stories in this period of time are just so personal, and make those connections that we're seeking in our work. So being able to capture some of that through social media, I think, is really helpful. And also having kind of an arc to the way that you're telling those stories. For example, we did a kind of a social media campaign around music and healing, and invited several alumni, many prominent alumni, to come back and do short snippets with little stories about where they've been during the pandemic. And that was really successful, very personal. And it was a way to get music out through social media. It's great.
I love
if I
please
jump a comment. I'm enjoying listening to the conversation, and I'm so glad to see so many conductors involved in on this topic, because from the orchestra management point of view, I wanted to make a couple of comments on how the orchestra management world has really evolved since the time I worked with Tanya at New World Symphony and then at St. Louis Symphony. Orchestras started having education and community program people, or they used to call it community outreach, back when, 80s and 90s, started having people on staff of the orchestra. And I would say for a long time, the musicians and a lot of the management looked at these programs as an extracurricular nuisance and didn't want to give it a lot of attention and focus. Fortunately, at St. Louis, they were one of the first to have this type of work combined in the musician's contract. But since that time, it's really evolved so that orchestra managers and more orchestra musicians expect this to be part of their core work at an orchestra and want to be involved, or at least should. And a lot of that's because of work that people like Tanya are doing at schools like NEC. New World Symphony has been making this a core part of their message for a long time, so that when a member of New World Symphony wins a job and goes somewhere to an orchestra, they expect to be involved in programs that we now call community partnerships and community engagement. And they've really gotten away from the outreach concept. And I would encourage everyone not to use that word. And there are many reasons why, but these are really partnerships and finding ways to engage your community. So I'm just happy to see a real shift. In fact, having a background in education and community engagement, which is my background and how I got started in orchestra management, is now seen as an asset for an executive director. Instead of, why the hell would we want you to run an organization when that's all you know how to do? That's what it used to be. So I think they're not dumping all of these programs on the new young assistant conductor. It's now more and more part of what the music director is doing and hopefully wants to be involved in. So I'm happy to see that shift. So Tanya, you need to clone yourself. We need one at every music school. I'm happy that the programs are spreading though.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. For those of you in the room who are not familiar with Mark's role, he of course is our executive director at the Monteux School, but he also serves as executive director of the Symphony New Hampshire in Nashua, New Hampshire. And so he speaks from a wealth of kind of running professional organizations as well as being our executive director of the school as well. And so happy to have his perspective on all of this because the world is changing in a positive way. And I'm also very glad to hear that so much of what Tanya and Diane have been saying today is rooted in um, listening to people well and developing your listening skills and researching in a way that allows you to listen in an informed way and then to respond in an informed way. So that's a theme that I kind of wanted to notice. And I also notice as I sort of am still working in the phase of my career that makes me have to do a lot of interviews, that a lot of the skills that you all are mentioning about building partnerships reflect in many ways what you also do to prepare well for an interview, which is that you research, obviously, and then you show that you have an interest, a shared interest in building whatever organization that you are trying to build a partnership with or trying to become a part of. So that's something I'm noticing as well as we kind of cover all these themes. I think I'd like to move to a question that we had about how to interact with really, really young audiences. So, Peter and the Wolf is our big children's, programming thing. And that's, maybe for somebody who can sit still for about 20, 25 minutes, that's good. Then what? If we're going really, really young, what are your tips on how to interact, build, organize, any of that?
So the Philadelphia Orchestra has a program that we've kind of modeled after, which is for very, very young kids, usually 3 to 4 year olds up to maybe 7 or 8 year olds. And it's really a story time type of program. And it usually involves a storyteller and an ensemble of some sort. And so we did this program and we actually interviewed storytellers. We have a storyteller club or organization in our area, and we interviewed them and auditioned people. We found a storyteller we liked, and we created the show with the storyteller and with the musicians. So we sort of said, okay, we want to introduce them to the different families of instruments of the orchestra. We identified musicians in the orchestra that we felt worked well with kids that age. That's a really important thing to think about. It's not just this is my best musician, but can they relate to a 4-year-old? Do they send love out when they walk into a room for these kids? And so we then worked with daycare centers because you can spend all this time developing this really wonderful program, but then if nobody comes, because our marketing, we had access to like grandkids of donors and of subscribers, but it was an age range that we didn't have a lot of parents that age coming to our regular subscription concerts. So we found identifying how to get the word out was a challenge for us. I think developing the programming was actually easier than finding a new audience for us. But I think it's very important that you reach that audience because many of those parents we tracked did eventually, we gave them a discount coupon to come to a concert when maybe they were going to have somebody babysit their kids and they were going to have a night out. And I think we were not on their radar until we did this storytelling program. So one of the things I always say is do your research of who's doing what around the country and copy the best ideas you can find. So I'm always on the hunt for a really good idea. And when I saw this in Philadelphia, I went down, we took actually our entire education committee went down to Philadelphia to watch their story time series and to decide if we could adapt it for us. And so we did research before we went into this. And then we also commissioned some pieces to fit this. So that's one of the programs that we did for very young kids.
Yeah, and we have a similar musical storytelling. It's actually a fellowship. So students spend a year learning how to create their own stories, how to adapt orchestral excerpts into traditional stories. So lots of creativity. A lot of our improvisation students actually participate in that fellowship. which is great. And the added piece I'll say is that we do work with early childhood educators, specifically on early emergent literacy. So we connect all of the programs directly to some of the objectives that the teachers have in the classroom. Those programs happen directly in the classroom, so a little bit of a different project, but then we hold an open showcase where we put all the stories together. And that's one of our most popular, successful events. We were actually able to transition it into a virtual space. So I'd be happy to share it in the chat. It's a little bit DIY. There's a student who's got like bubble wrap and golf clubs on either side of him because he had just moved, and a barking dog, and it's real lots of parents involved because these were students who had had to sort of flee. So it's really fun. I'll add it in the chat. You can check it out.
Yeah, I love the DIY aspect of so much of what's been put out in front. Like it's so cool to see. Like, I don't know if anyone else here tuned into like the Philly Orchestra's at home gala, but Yannick's cat was like sitting on the piano with his butt towards the camera. Like, it's just so awesome that we can see things that are real. And I think that that's something actually that also connects with young kids as well, in a way that I've found it's not productive to hide that, which is so that's very liberating, I feel.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm gonna take a question here from Emma, and then I'm gonna circle back to Nell's question because I feel like Nell's question will take us to a satisfying conclusion here. But Emma asks, as a music director, so maybe Diane, if you could speak first to this, how much can you appropriately, such as that concept is, be hands-on with donors, and what is your interaction with, like, how do you shape that relationship?
Yeah, so it's a long-term relationship. You definitely want to have a relationship with your donors. I mean, it's your most important. They are the people that are funding the vision of what you do. And so, for example, I have a sponsor that sponsors my position. This is a person I call and see how they're doing. I will send them a birthday card. I treat them as a very good friend, like family. They're my family. So I work very closely with we have a development director, a full-time person. I work very closely with them where we kind of look at the donors and we have a plan of how we stay in touch. So it definitely is hands-on, but I would never, ever approach that donor without working through the executive director and the staff they lead on that, because even if I have a great idea and I'm fishing to kind of see if they're interested at all, I would never make that ask until, as an organization, we had a plan, because they might have a much bigger plan or bigger ask for that donor that I'm not aware of. So you do have to be very careful. It is not your job to be the front person, unless you're maybe in a very, very, very small orchestra without an executive director or a very part-time executive director. But yes, my relationship is ongoing with most of our large donors. I feel very comfortable calling them but I rarely talk money with them. I rarely make an ask. I'm their friend. I basically say, how'd you like the concert? That type of thing. Yeah, but you will have to go to a lot of receptions, a lot of those types of things. That's part of your job. And remember names, and if not, have a system that somebody can help you, because people really, it's important that you remember their name and you remember something about them. Remember how many kids they have, what instruments they play, all that.
Yeah. We have a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the word schmoozing, which is what we use to talk about the way we interact about these things. And you seem to have a very positive framework for how to not think of it in all the ways that we, kind of naturally, we might think, oh, I have to go to this party, I have to. Can you speak a little bit as to how to approach that in kind of a healthy way that will allow us to not have kind of internal resistance to the whole exercise?
So it depends on your personality. Yeah. I don't believe, so schmoozing is insincere, I feel.
Yeah. Which is the problem that we all have with
the
word.
And so these are my friends. So I don't believe that for me, this is a friend that's invested in something I'm passionate about. So to me, it's not schmoozing at all. It's it's talking to someone who's invested in our business, and our business is bringing music to people.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on your personality and how comfortable you are with people. Because schmoozing sort of implies work and implies a very surface sort of fake relationship.
Yes.
And I would say that my relationships are very real with my people, because of my personality and my way to relate to them.
Well, it's important for even those of us who are, extremely introverted and don't, naturally strike up a conversation over a cocktail table about sports or whatever have you, to be able to find a sincere way to connect with other people and respect that they also are, as individuals, with their own worlds and their own investments and their own perspectives, just as valuable, and not just a tool to what, accomplishing your goals, which is, getting money or whatever it is.
And I do have to say, I'm not an extrovert. I know people think I am, but I had to actually learn these skills. I'm actually quite shy by nature. So I read a lot. That's why I wrote Beyond the Baton. I read a lot of books because I knew I had to overcome that. Yeah. So if you feel this is not your skill set, don't worry. You can absolutely train yourself in how to become more comfortable talking with people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. May I comment really quick?
Oh yeah, please, Emma.
Yeah, I've definitely have the learned extroversion thing, but the reason I ask about hands-on with donors, I'm starting my conducting degree at Northern Arizona University, and I'm being sponsored by some of the local donors, Mr. and Mrs. Kit, and their name is on the concert hall here. So I've been harassing the School of Music, trying to get them to put me directly in contact with Mr. and Mrs. Kit, because I'm dying to know their broader relationship with the school. And plus they're sponsoring me. I want to get to know them. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overstepping any boundaries by doing something like that.
Yeah, so with a university, you do have to be careful because they're going to guard their donors, particularly one that has their name on a building. So you may just want to start with writing a letter and seeing if they would give that letter to them. They may not even give you the address, but write a letter, and that would be, sometimes in today's world, particularly for an older donor, a handwritten letter, not an email, goes so far. Yeah.
I was already required to write a thank you letter that I had to upload to a Google Doc. And it was typed up, and that just wasn't enough for me personally. It didn't feel personal enough, and that's why I've been asking about it.
Yeah, we ask our orchestra members, we don't obviously require, but we actually, everyone that has a chair sponsor, my goal is to have every orchestra member sponsored, and I'm almost there. I think we're only missing 10 out of 72 musicians, and we just started 4 years ago. But we ask every musician to write a letter or reach out, and it's amazing. So, many of them have gone to coffee with their donors on their own, gone to lunch, but the orchestra has really stepped up to show their appreciation, and because it's about building those relationships. It's very much about that.
Yeah, great advice. I love the written letter idea. I'm going to circle back to a question that was about the community, our community as a musical, whole, and how that has migrated or shifted in this particular time when reaching, I'll just read it because she states it really beautifully, when reaching and interacting with people far away can be done in the same way that you would interact with a lot of people in your area, and how you might, whether your definitions of our community are kind of expanding or shifting at this moment.
Tiffany, I just wanted to note that Roberta has had her hand up, and I don't know if it was related to the last topic, but I just want to give you some airtime.
Roberta, would you like to unmute and get in?
Sure, absolutely, and thank you. I had a couple of little thoughts to share for a couple different topics. On the one of fundraising, when our board was talking about it, some were comfortable reaching out and some were not. And the ones that were not felt like they were asking all the time. What we found is that we actually have things that we can give our community. They want to be in touch with us. We can give them visibility. And Diane knows that in the area, the orchestra that we've worked with, we did a lot of commissions for our area. And we actually have a permanent wall design going in the art center at the art gallery of the 5 commissions in our prize and the history of the art center and the orchestra and the art gallery. But all the donors now are going to be permanently on the wall. That's this big, 13-foot, or I don't know how, but it's a real wide wall and oversized. It's larger than life, and all the donors are there permanently. They like that. And so sometimes we're reaching in the community to do what we do. I spoke with 2 realtors last night, and they said, Roberta, and I was telling them, you're on the wall. We were working on how their name was going to be listed. And they said, this feels so good. This is so nice to see that you're doing something. Now, this is not a performance. We also do a Chatfield Award, and the mayor and the city economic development director and tourism director were filmed on Friday, and they realized they're 2 flagship organizations in the city, the orchestra and the Festival of the Arts, aren't performing. And so they are going to do a permanent art tribute to both organizations, as well as provide us, like a city led moment to present the Festival of the Arts with their award. But they wanted to them, it was exactly what we're not getting now. So I would encourage us to know that we are that vehicle for the people to have this humanity that they don't get other places. That was a little bit about fundraising. Maybe a quick thing about community outreach. I do have something environmental if we get there later, but one thing we did had a piece written for our area. It was Fanfare for Lake Country, which was written for orchestra. And then we worked with 3 composers and had short, medium, long arrangements for all instruments made. So now we have an orchestral piece that when you reach into the schools or even later, everybody in the community can play all instruments, even guitar, tablature. But also when we do our Festival of the Art or our Chatfield Award tribute videos or any of our appreciation videos, our Fanfare for Lake Country theme, our music, it's sort of like the Interlaken theme, is under everything we put out. And guess what? That theme on our wall design is the theme. The first 8 bars is on the wall now. And so the city is starting to understand we have our own tune. But anyway, it was just from an educational standpoint, it allowed us to reach many different directions. One last thing about that is we also had a Lake Tones Legends landscape series with 20 movements. Each movement depicted an area, lake, or landmark. So when I go and I see somebody from Okauchee Lake, I can easily say, hey, did you see the video where you take a boat ride and you hear the music written for Okauchee Lake, or climb the tower, or Lapa Peak, or Upper and Lower Nabob? We have music for those. So that was a fun project that allowed me to open conversations with people I see on the street only because they live there, which if we did music that was not connected to our locale, in that case, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Thanks, Roberta.
So, Tiffany, you want to reframe that question that you asked?
So we're talking about how our definition of musical community and other communities, I guess communities surrounding musical organizations more accurately, has shifted during this time in particular, possibly, or maybe that's the internet age at large.
I'll just jump in really quickly. I mean, one thing I've noticed is that actually some projects have been able to get off the ground really fast because, what would have taken lots of organizational meetings and trying to get everyone in one place, people have actually been really eager to get into a Zoom space and let's make something happen. So, for example, this Boston Hope Hospital project, which brought musicians basically from all around Boston and some not in Boston together relatively quickly to create music for the hospital, which was a temporary hospital. So it all had to happen really fast. That's a project that would have normally taken a lot of planning. And for me, it was just remarkable to see the level of collaboration happening on such short notice and the ability to use technology to just move things forward. I'd also say, in the case of New England Conservatory, our students are currently all over the world. So we have done a lot of work around really capitalizing on that messaging that, our students in China are putting together programming that we're able to share with some of our Mandarin speaking residents at a senior center nearby. That could happen in normal time, sure, but we are really capitalizing on the fact that our students are international, many of them, and they are spread across the world, and they're making recordings in their childhood bedrooms. This is the reality that we're in right now. So I think there's something really poignant about getting people from, across the globe connected in this way. I don't know how it's played out for you, Diane.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. So in Allentown, we are members of the IMA. So if any of you on the call is not familiar with the IMA, the International Media Agreement, you really need to get a copy of that and read that, because that defines all internet rules for a union professional orchestra. What's happened is there have been some side letters that have been written that have now allowed us. Before COVID, we were not allowed without huge amounts of money to put anything up on the internet, except for, a minute or two from and it had to be marketing, and how they define marketing was a very narrow window. The exciting thing now, so for Allentown, we were filmed locally. We had great footage, 10 camera shoots, professional shoots, but we couldn't put them up anywhere. Now we are actually able to put them up. So this has been mind-boggling for us, because we were never able to do this before, but there's still limitations. It can only go up for 30 days. It has to be on a password protected site. So someone has to sign up for our mailing list in order to get access. So if you're working with a professional orchestra, even though we can get more things out, there's still a lot of limitations. If you're with a non-union orchestra, then the sky is the limit right now, because all the players are very eager to, perform in any sort of video thing or chamber music, and they want to get it out. I have players sending me materials. And when Garden State Philharmonic did a chamber music concert, I think we had people listening in from 25 different countries. We've never had people from 25 different countries ever hear the orchestra before. So I think that's something we can build upon going forward. And I will say that we have the capacity to draw donors from other areas. So if your orchestras have stuff up online, consider the quality that you want, of a quality that will attract people to donate to your orchestra. I think everybody's so eager just to put stuff up, but once it's up, it stays up for a long time. So really evaluate what you put up and how it's done.
Really good.
I'd also just add that, the dialogue across the field, I think, is at a totally different level. Even the fact that this conversation is happening right now, presents an amazing opportunity to really move our field forward. I know that I've never had the amount of communication that I'm having now with other conservatories. There's, constant communication across our schools, really talking to each other in a way, moving towards a shared goal that I haven't ever experienced. So I think there's some real beauty in that.
Yeah. It's exciting times, I think, even though it's a little depressing sometimes. And remember, you are the leaders for your organization. So even if you wake up every once in a while feeling kind of depressed by the situation, which I know, to be honest, we all feel that way a little bit, remind yourself they are looking to you to be the positive person, to be, so if you're on a board call, a musician call, try to show the positive way forward always, because that's what being a leader is. It's helping people make decisions of how to go forward in a positive way, even though we all recognize that we're fighting it too.
Yeah. Oh, this has been really exceptional, Diane and Tanya. Thank you so much. I have one last point of order. Tony LaGruth mentions that this is a date of some significance in the Monteux School history. And so if I could just ask him to quickly unmute and tell us what it is and to commemorate a little bit.
Thank you, Tiffany. Tanya, it's great to see you again. Diane, always a pleasure. You guys were wonderful today. Thank you for sharing your time with all of us. Today marks the 25th anniversary of Maestro Brooks' passing in Hancock, Maine. And I was there that summer that he passed on, and I know Scott might have been there. I see Roberta certainly was a Brooks disciple. A lot of you faces are new to me and are certainly students of Michael Jinbo's, but I know this is a day that is significant to Michael as well. So I thought I'd bring that up so that everybody was aware. We'll take a minute to acknowledge men who helped to make the school what it is today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tiffany.
Sometimes Maestro will tell the events of what happened that summer at at a particularly, I don't know, point in the rehearsal, and it's an astonishing kind of series of events, and we are all very grateful for the history of the school, which anyone who's been there knows that we take very seriously. You know, the over 75 years now that we've been in Maine is due in major part to the three. There's only been three maestros who have led us through, and also have enabled us to do things like what we are doing today. So thanks, Tony. Thank you so much, Tanya and Diane. This has been, like I said, really exceptional. I certainly was taking notes the entire time. I can't wait to start talking, connecting with people, and sending emails, and doing good work. So you certainly inspired me, and I think everyone else in the room here as well. So with that, I think we'll bring this session to a close, and be well, everyone. Stay healthy, and hope to see you on Monday for our next session.
Great. Thank you.